Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. We are starting one more live stream today, Sunday, February the 1st, 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time. And as usual, if you're here with us, you have a priority to suggest a topic of your interest to be discussed live. Don't be shy. We are here for you, and every opinion matters. All right. While you arm up, let's get started with some news and sharing here our screen. Let me know if sound, if everything is good. And all right, the first headline is still about that bank, right? It looks like every single live stream is gonna go back to the subject. I'm not gonna be, like wasting your time and my time. Basically, it is the story of Banco Master, a relatively big bank in Brazil that went bankrupt. And now there is this whole discussion. There are family members of justices of the Brazilian Supreme Court making literally hundreds of millions based on this bank and other, interesting investments, to say the least, right? And you know where this thing is going to get. And I'm not going to waste your time anymore with this news. Always, the same news, and nobody goes to jail. I wish, people were going to jail for corruption, for whatever they did wrong. And until this becomes a reality, I'm not going to bother you again with the same subject. Another interesting topic here, Brazil is talking about tennis as a sport, and something very interesting, sneakers, sneakers in Brazil, we're going to call the translation in Portuguese is tennis, right? So tennis as the sport is the same name that we use for sneakers in Brazil. And we also call the sport tennis, right? So in Brazil, the word tennis is going to mean either the sport or either sneakers. That's a very interesting use of the word. Now, another piece of interesting information here, it says that in 2025, there was a new record of foreign citizens present in Brazil. Here they're mentioning they are not only Argentinians, because Argentinians, they've been moving to Brazil big time, right? Argentinians, they love Brazil not only for the nature, for the beauty of our beaches, but also because of the economy, right? Also because of the economy, it looks like the new administration is kind of catching up or picking up in terms of economy in Argentina. But historically, if you look back, for the last 20 years, it is very repetitive that the Argentinian economy will go through mostly bad times, right? So when nowadays you go to Rio de Janeiro, not Rio de Janeiro the city, but many of the beaches outside of the main city, you're gonna see many Argentinians, okay? And if you go to the city of Búzios especially, it is just astonishing the number of Argentinians. Very common for you to go to a restaurant and the person, starts to talk in Spanish, and if you say, listen, I'm unable to communicate in Spanish, they're gonna say, well, I'm sorry, but that's the best I can do. They're gonna try to adapt their Spanish to make it themselves understandable, like in Portuguese, but it's gonna be a mix, and we call this mix Portunhol, right? A mix between Portuguese and Espanol. That's how we call Spanish in Portuguese, Espanol. So very interesting in Búzios. Another thing in Búzios, right? Last time I went to Búzios, there are some tours, like you can you don't rent a full boat, you can participate in a tour. And I went there with my family, And it was very impressive. Like every presentation during the tour would start with Spanish as the standard language, and then second would come Portuguese. And I said, wow, that's crazy, right? We are in Brazil, and now Spanish seems to be the dominant language, at least in this location. But from a business perspective, I could totally understand, because most of the tourists over there, they were actually, guess what, Argentinians. And not only the tourists, but also the employees managing the boat and providing the services. They were, guess what, Argentinians, right? So that's why you see here the headline talking about Argentinians. They're just coming like in literally hundreds of thousands to Brazil over the past decades as we speak, and so on. But there are also like so many, foreign citizens coming from the United States, from Europe, and many other countries. All right, I think that's enough with the news. Let's take a look. Let's take a look back at our live stream to see if we have any chats. I don't see any chats so far. If you are here with us, send me a hello so I know everything is working well with the chat window. If I don't see anything going on, I'm gonna assume it is frozen, and then I'm gonna need to refresh our stream. So please, if you can, just give a shout so I know things are working fine. All right, and in the meantime, I'm gonna talk about litigation in Brazil, right? Most of our clients for real estate, thankfully, they are clients for regular real estate transactions. A lot of real estate transactions in Rio de Janeiro, a lot of real estate transactions in São Paulo, Florianopolis, Northeast, you name it, okay? But we also have, unfortunately, right, for our clients, litigation. We also have a lot of litigation, particularly people who buy real estate, off-plan properties, right? Like off-plan properties mean like, a property that doesn't exist. It exists only on paper, right? So you're gonna buy at an early stage of the development. You're gonna get a bigger discount, right? Because you are basically, we are basically taking on risk, and then hopefully you're gonna receive this property down the line. Now, not surprisingly, many people, they're not gonna get anything at the end of the journey, and then the only resource they're gonna have is gonna be to sue whoever took their money and try to recover something, okay? Now, some markets are gonna be worse than others. In Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, big Brazilian cities, whenever you're sticking with a large developer, most of the time you're gonna get what you're paying for. And the most serious situations we see, they are in less developed areas of the country. One, unfortunately, Ceará, like I love Ceará state. I have myself a lot of, let's say, presence or footprint in the state. And unfortunately, many developers, right, like they're very fast to take money from foreign citizens, and then down the road, well, guess what? You're gonna become a headache, right? Like when you show up with your money on your hands, you're gonna be seen, as a lovable foreign citizen. But down the line, once they are entangled into the development itself, if they face any type of challenges to make it the development a reality, then you're gonna be seen as a problem. It's no longer a source of income, right? So we do have many clients in the northeast of Brazil for litigation cases in which they paid for and they didn't get the property, all right? So just hammering over here, if you know of any friend who's buying off-plan in the northeast, okay, make sure these people are not gonna pay the whole price up front. I don't understand how someone would pay, the whole price before receiving the property, right? Maybe because of a glossy brochure, maybe because of a soft-spoken salesperson. I don't know. I don't do it, and I recommend you don't do it. And if you have a friends considering investing in Brazil, if they buying off-land properties, the rule should be, pay as little as possible during the development and save to pay the bulk of the money against the possession, right? Like, I mean, if you're gonna pay the full price, guess what? The property should be over there, right? Not just paying full price for a promise, all right? So hammering, so you don't need to become our client for litigation down the line. Yes, we live from legal services, but I guess we could also make money from advising you on how to buy correctly in the first place. We have Matt. Oi, Dr. Oliveira. Thank you for pinging us, Matt and Adrian. And we also have Aaron. Only in Quebec to protect the French language and culture. All right, there you go, Aaron. Good to see you. Serge, bom dia. Yes, many Argentinians in Búzios. Is there an easier pathway with residency because I have both citizenships? Is there a difference between U.S. passport or European? All right, easier pathway with residency. You're probably talking about residency in Brazil, right, Serge? Just heads up, because we also deal with Portugal, but you're talking about Búzios, so I'm gonna assume it is Brazil, and you have U.S. passports or European. So that's an interesting question, and Brazil does offer different pathways depending on your nationality. Brazil is also pretty consistent in terms of looking at different nationalities in different ways, right? So there is a consistency in treating different nationalities different, if you will. And in terms of different passports, I would say if you come from an European country or any country that speaks Portuguese, then guess what? There is a specific track for that national. Now, if you're not, then it's gonna be mostly the same for both U.S. passports and European passports, right? Like, so let's say if you're French, if you're German, if you're Belgian, okay, if you're from the Netherlands, if you're Dutch, right? If you're Japanese, if you are, from the United States, it's going to be mostly the same journey towards citizenship. And again, if you're coming from a Portuguese-speaking country, that's when typically you're going to see an easier track for you to achieve citizenship. Now, I understand you're probably not Argentinian, but just because we mentioned Argentinians, for people from Latin America, there is also a special type of track, and it's a track available for the Mercosul. Mercosul is our type of European Union, right? Like, I don't know, the Latin America Union, it's called the Mercosul. So if you're from the Mercosul, guess what? There is also an expedited track available for you. All right, very interesting also distinctions in terms of visa requirements, amounts that you're gonna pay for stuff. And for the United States, as of today, you're gonna need a visa to come to Brazil, meaning that you can't just buy an airfare and take a plane. Now, if you're from the UK, if you're from Germany, right? If you are from France, guess what? Yes, you can basically just buy an airfare and travel to Brazil without the need for a visa. Now, very interesting, it looks like a major upside for Europeans, but on the other hand, U.S. citizens, Canadians, and Australians, they are typically allowed to come to Brazil for 90 days, and while you're in Brazil, they can apply for an extension for an additional 90 days, making a total of 180 days in the country. Remember, the extension is never guaranteed, but in most cases, yes, you can obtain an extension. Now, for Europeans, the downside is that the standard rule is 90 days per semester, meaning that you cannot extend your stay, right? Like we saw exceptions happening in the past, but that's going to be typically when the immigration officer doesn't know what they're doing over there, and they end up giving you an extension by mistake. And mistakes happen very often. There was a very interesting mistake. I mean, there are mistakes we identify pretty much every week here at the firm, but there was a major one recently. There was a couple, and they were applying. I don't recall if it was Rio de Janeiro, but it was a couple applying for the digital nomad. If I'm not mistaken, the wife applied for the digital nomad, and she secured. Digital nomad is just for a single year, and then her husband applied under family reunification, meaning he wouldn't apply for a standalone digital nomad, but he would apply for a family reunification mirroring the digital nomad of the wife. And guess what he got? He got indefinite residency in Brazil, meaning permanent residency in Brazil, right? And now, as soon as they got that, like they felt like they won the lottery, right? And then the wife was saying, "Listen, now can I apply for family reunification under his permanent residency, right?" And I said, "Listen, we have two major problems over there, right? Like the first problem is that you cannot apply for family reunification to piggyback on someone who's already piggybacking through family reunification. So it's just one level of family reunification. You cannot have like one piggybacking on someone who's piggybacking already on someone else, right?" So that was the first challenge to their plan. The second one was the clear mistake by the Brazilian immigration in granting the husband permanent residency, right? So my take on that was, listen, I think as soon as someone who knows what they're doing would review your cases, guess what? They would void your husband permanent residency, okay? So don't do it. Don't try to, piggyback, and that could even backfire. Like, I mean, they could, potentially assess that you're trying to defraud the Brazilian immigration, right? Like her husband's case, naturally, it wasn't their fault. They never asked for the permanent residency. It was granted by the Brazilian Federal Police as a clear mistake. But now, if you try to get something out of it, then it's a different story, because, you know clearly that you shouldn't have received that thing in the first place. And we see a bunch of mistakes. There was another recent one. A client of ours applied for the Brazil real estate investor, and typically you're gonna get 4 years, and for some weird reason they gave him like 3 years. Okay, there was another similar case. That was maybe a couple of years ago. We had a couple applying for the real estate investor visa. They got a property, I think it was for 2 million reais. So instead of doing family reunification, they were doing two standalone applications, which is better, because if something happens to one of the spouses, guess what? The other one is not gonna lose. It's not gonna lose the immigration rights, because this person was piggybacking on another, right? So they had two standalone Brazil real estate investor visas, and guess what? One got the typical 4 years, and the other one got just 2 years. And we could tell, this person got 2 years because it was the understanding from a prior regulation. So it looks like it was processed by two different, immigration officers. One was up to date in terms of the regulation, which says you should get 4 years. The other one was still operating, like his head was still under the prior regulation, meaning this person didn't know there was an update to the regulation, and therefore granted only 2 years to the applicant. Because those two applicants, they had a very fragile case, I told them, listen, I wouldn't bother go, back over there and say, listen, you did a mistake, right? Because if you do so, guess what? You are also giving an opportunity for the immigration officer to redo the analysis that was done at the first place. I said, you know what, you guys didn't do what you should have done correctly in the first place. You got the residency, you know, I think you should be happy with it. And once you've been here for a couple of years, you just renew it, right? And that's exactly what they did. All right, so just sharing some, you know, stories from the trenches here at the firm. Serge has French citizenship. All right, Serge. So, you know, if you're looking for citizenship, right, the two common tracks nowadays are going to be investment in real estate. A track that we don't particularly like here at the firm is also going to be investment in a business. All right. Now there is no a special track for Europeans or for French. Okay, Serge. I hope that was helpful. Aaron, I spent some time in Barueri, São Paulo, and seemed it safe enough during the day. What are the safer neighborhoods in São Paulo you recommend for foreigners moving permanently to Brazil? Aaron, I'm gonna tell you what I like most in the entire state of São Paulo. That's very specific to me as an individual, all right? That's not a recommendation, general recommendation. So I love the cities of Vinhedo and Valinhos, right? And we have a current client of ours. He's buying a chácara, right? It roughly translates as a ranch. He's buying a ranch around the city of Valinhos. You know, those two cities, they are lovable. They have this kind of feeling of a small town, but they are not far from São Paulo city. Okay, so I did live in the past many years in the city of Vinhedo, and I used to travel between São Paulo and Vinhedo, like, you know, at least a couple of times a week. Okay, and you know, it works pretty well. I know people who would travel every single day between Vinhedo or Valinhos and São Paulo, meaning that they live in those small cities, but they actually work physically in São Paulo. I just didn't like, you know, the whole traveling, so I would travel, stay a couple of days in São Paulo, and then I would go back to Vinhedo and do the same thing, stay a couple of days in Vinhedo, and then, you know, keep this thing going for a few years. Those cities, they are extremely, they are not extremely, but much safer than São Paulo city. São Paulo city by itself, I don't think it is as safe as I wish it was, particularly when you are a foreign citizen, all right? Probably the same level of issues as you have in Rio de Janeiro. Now, another option, if safety is number one priority, Aaron, I would strongly consider Florianopolis. Okay, Florianopolis is just like, you know, a different ball game when we're talking about safety in São Paulo. And I think there is a cultural component, right? Like when you go south of Brazil, you're gonna start to feel a more European version of Brazil. Lots of Germans, Italians, but mostly Germans and you know, Dutch people. You have, you know, even like physically, you're gonna see that people in Brazil are gonna start to look different, and maybe because of the culture, but also I think that for Florianopolis is mostly because of the geography, right? As you probably know, Florianopolis is an island, right? So I think, you know, bad people, they don't like to be in an island, because if they do bad stuff, guess what? You're not gonna, you know, get away from an island on time. So Florianopolis extremely safe, okay? Much more safer than São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and potentially even like Curitiba. Curitiba is another destination that is famous with people looking for safety in first place. But guess what? Curitiba is not an island, so difficult to beat Florianopolis, right? Like in Florianopolis is one of the few places in Brazil that when I am, like, you know, recording outside, like I'm not really concerned that someone is gonna come and snatch my iPhone from my hand, right? It's gonna be in Florianopolis. Everywhere else, I'm always concerned that if I take my phone, if I'm recording, if I'm talking over the phone, someone is gonna come and snatch my phone and run away. Very typical in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, unfortunately. All right, what else? Hermon, afternoon everyone. I hope your Sunday is going well. Thank you, Hermon. So good to see you. General Principal, boa tarde, Mr. Oliveira. Boa tarde, General Principal. Hope everything is well, for sure. Just a heads up, your audio sounds different today. Volume is lower. Are you using a different microphone? Thank you, General. That was very helpful. I basically forgot to bring my microphone up. Thank you so much, General. And apologies to everyone else, all right? Like I basically forgot to position my microphone. But now I hope problem solved. Thank you for the heads up. Marisa Navas, boa tarde, Dr. Luciano. Obrigada pelos seus ensinamentos. Thank you, Marisa. Thank you, Ricardo. So good to see you over here. And I already spoke with you guys today, and I appreciate the support. All right, hope all is well. Marisa and Ricardo, they've been reporting that from Portugal, there is a lot of raining, right? There is a lot of raining and bad weather. There was, unfortunately, some bad weather kind of hurting some of the cities north of Lisbon. But it looks like most people are safe, and it was mostly, a physical damage in those cities. Thank you again, Marisa and Ricardo. All right, Aaron, the Valinhos beside Campinas, that's exactly the case, Aaron. That's this kind of axis, right, between São Paulo and Campinas. And in between São Paulo and Campinas, you're going to have three major cities. It's going to be Valinhos, Vinhedo, and there is also another city called, I'm going to write over here, Jundiaí. All right, my father used to live in Jundiaí for many years until his death. And he used to love Jundiaí. All right, that's a big city that's bigger than Valinhos, bigger than Vinhedo, and I don't think as high quality as Valinhos and Vinhedos, but pretty solid as well. Particularly if you're looking for universities and again a more like average size type of feeling, then you're gonna find in Jundiaí instead of Valinhos e Vinhedos. But that's exactly the axis between São Paulo and Campinas. Campinas is also good, is also pretty solid. Campinas, I would say, is more aligned with São Paulo in terms of safety. Okay, so not that different from São Paulo, and you have a huge universities, companies, and overall market in Campinas. There is a very famous university in Campinas, Universidade de Campinas, known in Brazil as Unicamp, is one of the top universities in São Paulo, or actually in Brazil, not just in São Paulo. Matt Gaines, are you familiar with Citibank and would you recommend them? Unfortunately, the bank that I use cannot wire internationally, so I am considering moving to Citibank or Chase. Matt, typically those major banks, right, like Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, or Wells Fargo, they would all work for the purpose of sending wire transfers to Brazil. Okay, now for people pursuing specifically the retirement visa, and I don't think that's your case, but when they are pursuing the retirement, I usually check with our team which bank is making easier the issuance of a letter saying that you can wire the funds to Brazil. Okay, because for the retirement track, there is a need for this letter, and some banks, they are more flexible in terms of getting this letter than others, right? So if you're working with our team, let me know if they're being helpful with that front. If that's not the case, then we can, review this together with the team. But that type of policy changes over time. So it's not just about the capability of sending a wire transfer to Brazil, is also the capability of getting you a customized letter basically saying, listen, this person has a bank account with us, and yes, his bank account has this feature of wiring funds to Brazil. Sometimes if they are unable to get this letter, what we do is to actually, have you sent a wire transfer to us, right? Meaning that you could be making a payment, and it could be of any amount, right? Like it could be of $10, if you will, as long as you make a wire transfer and we receive in our bank account in Brazil, that transfer by itself is going to prove to the Brazilian immigration that yes, you are able to make a transfer to Brazil. Okay, just to avoid follow-up questions that are typical whenever I talk about this letter. If you try to send by TransferWise or just Wise nowadays, right? Remitly, Western Union, MoneyGram, right? Like all of those money apps, immigration, they don't like those apps, right? Because whenever we are talking about consistency, like, the Brazilian immigration is going to see those things more as like, shortcuts or workarounds. So whenever we are working for the purpose of a retirement visa or residency, we're going to always push for the documentation to be showing a wire transfer, which is the 100% compliant way of sending money to Brazil from the immigration perspective, if you will. All right, Matt. So if you are getting a bank just because of that, then I would check first which bank is better on that front. But we have clients using all of those major banks, right? Chase, Bank of America, Citibank, Wells Fargo, and so on. So, at the end of the day, if you want to just proceed with Citibank or Chase, I'm 100% sure we can make it work for you. All right, Matt. All right, Hermon, what is the city called in Brazil they refer as mini Germany, and what are the real estate prices like? Hermon, I'm gonna guess Blumenau, right? So let me guess here, Blumenau. That would be my guess. Blumenau, the German city in Brazil, all right? That's Blumenau. And very interesting, like when I was in my early 20s, right? When I was at college in Sao Paulo, I used to go to Blumenau for, guess what? Let's see if any of you would guess the festival, typical German festival that would naturally occur in Blumenau, and someone in his early 20s would love to go. Let's see if you guys can guess. I'm not gonna say, but I'm sure some of you will know what I'm talking about. A German festival, a very famous festival that naturally would take place in Blumenau, since Blumenau is just like how you're saying, right? Like, I mean, just like Hermon's saying, the German city in Brazil. What would be the festival? Let me know. Do you know the answer? What type of festival is that? A guy in his early 20s would leave São Paulo to stay there for a few days during the peak. All right, ripple effect. There you go. October Festival. Yes, in Brazil we call it Oktoberfest. Okay, and that's exactly the case. Ripple effect. You got it. You nailed. All right. So yes, in my early 20s, right, with my friends from college, we would basically get into a tour. And this tour would leave São Paulo, right? It would be by bus, and then we would go to Blumenau just for Oktoberfest. And during Oktoberfest, it was basically just drinking beer and other, like German drinks, but mostly beer and chop. And then with, like German music and German food, right? That's something extremely big, and the city of Blumenau is gonna receive like buses from throughout the country, right? Like you're gonna have buses coming even believe it or not, from the northeast of the country. I don't know. They're gonna spend like 3 days to get to Blumenau. That's not gonna be a problem. People wanna go to Blumenau, and the city becomes something unbelievable. Now, I don't know if it's still the same thing, but I remember when I would go there, there would be like, I don't recall if it was a firefighter truck, but they would distribute like, cans of beer to the buses, to the participants, right? It was complete madness. I think that, there was like 30 years ago. I would guess nowadays it wouldn't be the same, right? Like nowadays, for, the government, for the municipality to be distributing beers, I don't think it is compatible to nowadays, right? But that was the case back then. It was just, a blast, to tell you the truth. All right. What else we have? John 4x4. Hello, Olivier. Hello, John. Welcome. Serge, thank you so much. Serge is buying me coffee today, or is lunch. Like it's gonna be like a mini lunch or coffee. I appreciate, Serge. Thank you so much. Very generous of you. All right, appreciate it. Aaron, the real estate around Unicamp is a gold mine, but I'm 20 years late to invest. Yes, Aaron. So I can tell Aaron knows Campinas, right? So Unicamp is like this large university that exists in Campinas, and the area is by itself very prime, right? Because of demand, from the university, but because the university is there, there is also demand not only because of the students, but because of researchers, because of workers. So the entire area is very valuable, right? And just like Aaron was saying, difficult for you, or not difficult, but you can buy, and you're gonna pay premium prices to live in the area. Just as a curiosity, right? Like I did pass the public examination to get into Unicamp. It was, again, it was like 30 years ago, okay, or more than 30 years ago. It was actually, like prior to college. And back then, I don't know how Unicamp works today, but back then, they had like a separate entrance examination. And the entrance examination in Brazil, like for the top universities like São Paulo University and Unicamp, they are typically 4 days long, right? And for each day, you're going to have about a 5-hour examination. And then at the end of this journey, they are going to make calculations with your individual scores, and then they are going to put you in a rank. And naturally, for whatever you're trying to enter, they are going to have a passing list based on your ranking. Okay, so if you want to attend like engineering, which was the thing that I did pass back then for Unicamp, they're going to say, all right, what do you want to study? Is it like civil engineering, or is it electrical engineering? We have, I don't know, we have 90 seats here, like, and if you are, ranking in the top 90 positions, guess what? You pass. If you're not in the 90 positions, but you're between the 90 and the 150, you're gonna go to the waiting list and so on, right? But that's how it used to work 30 years ago. Nowadays is slightly different. Instead of making this very stressful type of entrance examination, in Brazil, now we have a different program that you're going to be evaluated throughout high school. Okay, so you're going to be getting, it's just like the GPA, right? Like, I mean, you're getting your results out of high school, and then there's still like the stressful type of examination, but they're going to combine the grades. And the idea here is that some people perform better than others, under stress. So they wanted to remove like this 100% weight on the 4-day examination and give people like some credit for their history during high school, right? So nowadays, for I would guess Unicamp, University of São Paulo, which in my opinion remains like the number one university in the country, and they used to say like the one of the top 100 universities global wide. Not talking about Brazil anymore. I'm talking about universally, right? São Paulo University was typically traditionally in the top 100 list. But Unicamp traditionally is as good as São Paulo University. Very interesting sharing, Aaron. All right, Matt, thank you. Yes, I'm pursuing the retirement visa. Yes, Matt. So listen, I would go with any of them, right? Chase is super friendly. Okay, like I also use Chase. Like we have a Chase account in the US, and I think it's super friendly. I love Chase Bank. Okay, they are not really good in terms of developing a credit history, at least from my perspective. Like we've been, banking with Chase potentially for 20 years, which is for how long we've been in this business, for about 20 years, and we have basically no credit, right? And in the United States, when we need credit, like there are some much smaller banks, we go over there and they give us credit. I don't understand. How can you bank with someone for 20 years, you don't get anything, and then you go to someone different, and from the get-go, they give you a lot of credit, right? But that's a mystery. Now, from the interface, right, like from the experience, I do think, Chase Bank is pretty big. They have a very consistent wire transfer interface to Brazil as well. Matt, and I think this is key for you, right? Like if you're gonna be wiring to Brazil, you want to have something consistent, someone who knows what they're doing, and Chase is gonna fit the bill. All right, Oktoberfest, they have the largest one outside of Germany. Look at that, Hermon. That's interesting. So you're saying that the largest one is it gonna be Blumenau? It could be, because I'm telling you, like it is like something out of this world, right? Like I mean, you have I'm not talking about hundreds. I would assume, maybe I'm mistaken, right? But I would assume maybe thousands of buses coming from Trufal, Brazil to Blumenau, and they develop it over the decades, right? Like over the decades at least, a large park area that's going to concentrate most of the event, right? But I'm not talking about a park for 1,000 people. I'm probably talking about a park for a few dozen thousands of people. I don't know, for 50,000. Maybe it's bigger nowadays, but it is just like impressive, right? And I believe this is something more for younger folks, maybe even for older folks. Maybe they wouldn't go to the event itself, like they could more enjoy the partying rhythm of the city, but not to go into the main event, because I remember at the main event, when it was like 3-4 a.m. in the morning, they would have like a medical station, and this medical station would be like treating I would guess like hundreds of people, right? Like from over consuming alcohol, right? So I don't know. Something very typical. Again, maybe it was a better fit, to society 30 years ago. I don't know how Blumenau and Oktoberfest is working nowadays. Maybe the same thing, maybe not. Who knows? All right, General Principal, Dr. Oliveira, outside of staying 183 days and permanent residency, have you seen action situations that lead to foreigners unintentionally triggering tax residents, especially with buying property? General Principal, that's a very advanced question. That's a very interesting question. And I for most of my consultations, I'm going to be talking about those two, about only these two. But to avoid the liability, which is always in the in the back of the head of an attorney, right? Like, I mean, whatever you're talking, you're dealing with someone who's naturally not a lawyer or not a legal professional. So you need to be really careful with what you say. So whenever I have a consultation, I always gonna say, or even here in the live streams, typically those are the two triggers, right? But if they were the only two triggers, I wouldn't say typically, because then they would be the only two triggers. So if I say typically they're the only two triggers, yes, you're correct. There are other triggers outside. Now, some of these triggers, they are not, how can I say, 100% enough to trigger the tax residency. But I'm going to tell you one that many Brazilians, like, they either don't know or they know and they pretend that they don't know, okay? And this trigger is going to be a traditional bank account, all right? Like, if you have a traditional bank account in Brazil, that is exclusively for, guess what? Tax residents. In Brazil, we have this kind of, two regimes, and each regime is going to ask for specific behaviors and specific types of account. So if you are a non-tax resident, then you must use a non-resident bank account. All right. And if you get a regular traditional bank account, guess what? You are basically confessing to the Brazilian Revenue Service that you are what? That you are a regular tax resident. And again, Brazilians, they pretend that they don't understand. I have many times, mixed couples, like meaning a Brazilian and American citizen. And very often the Brazilians are going to say, well, like, I do everything by the books. And then the first thing I ask is like, all right, what type of bank account do you have in Brazil? Well, I have a bank account I opened with bank X and Y Z 30 years ago. And I can immediately tell, like, this person is using a regular Brazilian bank account, and they are, guess what? They are triggering tax residency in Brazil. And like, I mean, they don't know better. That's all. Like, I mean, it doesn't mean that they are, trying to deceive, or they are, and to be honest with you, I think even though they could get in trouble, like, I mean, the government could say, well, you're using a traditional tax resident account, and guess what? I want to, charge you taxes. I don't think that using a traditional Brazilian bank account alone would be enough, to, land you a tax residency in Brazil. Okay, but one thing I can tell you for sure, if you wanna really do things correctly by the books and avoid any chance of headaches down the line, you must secure a non-resident bank account. Okay, that's the one you want to have. Now, there is also the interaction with the Brazilian immigration. Okay, now if you are in Brazil and if you are a permanent resident, naturally you're not going to be able to get a non-resident bank account. You should get what? You should get a resident bank account. Okay, but that's just one example. General principle of another trigger, right? I'm gonna give you just one more trigger. Otherwise, it's gonna become a tax consultation, something that we cannot do over here. But another trigger would be for you to manage a Brazilian company. Managing Brazilian companies and being the legal representative of a Brazilian company, this is gonna be allowed exclusively for, guess what? Tax residents in Brazil. So if you don't want to, trigger that, you want to avoid being the legal representative or managing a business in Brazil. If you do one of those two things, again, it's another trigger for tax residency. Very interesting question, General Principal. All right, Steven, I have a friend who tells me that Salvador Bahia is very dangerous, but my friends in Salvador say that's perfectly fine. What do you think? Is the truth somewhere in between? There you go, Steven. That's a good and correct guess. The truth is somewhere in between. And I think, Steven, that another nuance to that is that different people, they are going to have different interpretations, right? We have a client in Sao Paulo, and we actually had a joint live stream. Like, I was basically interviewing this gentleman. It was probably a couple of years ago, and he would say he would feel absolutely safe in Sao Paulo. Okay, and I am from Sao Paulo, and to be honest with you, I don't feel exactly safe in Sao Paulo, right? So, how can you conciliate, right? Like a U.S. citizen, and this gentleman, as far as I remember, I think he was from California. Yeah, I'm almost sure he was from California, and he was living in São Paulo, or he's probably still living in São Paulo, and he loves São Paulo, right, because of access, to amazing food, every single type of service you want. If you want a really high end to a gym, guess what? You're gonna get stuff you don't even have in the United States. Yes, believe it or not, like in São Paulo, we have things that you're not gonna have access in the United States, right? Luxury cars and really high end types of services. This stuff is not typically available in the US. They are typically available in São Paulo. They are typically available in Rio, right? So the same way here, Stephen, I think that's the case for Salvador, right? So if you know how to behave, right? If you're gonna avoid stuff that gets people in trouble often, like if you're gonna be careful when using your, I don't know, iPhone 16 or 17, if you are careful when using your phones, if you're careful, not showing like a MacBook Pro in a cafe in downtown Salvador, right? If you're not wearing jewelry, right? If you're not like, showing cash, you're gonna decrease the chances of an unfortunate event like substantially. So someone who knows how to behave in Salvador, it may be very well possible that this person is going to live for years in Salvador without ever facing a violent situation, all right? And another person, maybe who didn't know better, it could be, it could be in a situation in just a matter of a couple of weeks in Salvador, right? So this is like a thesis, but one thing I can tell you for sure, Stephen, like Salvador is not recognized, at least among of us Brazilians, right, as the safest capital, right? Like just telling you the bare truth, right? Not recognized as a top safe city in Brazil. If safety is of concern, in my opinion, the safest cities, they are in the south of Brazil, right? And they are not going to be São Paulo, by the way. They're probably going to be, like in Rio Grande do Sul, right? Like the extreme south of Brazil. They are going to be Santa Catarina, right? They're going to be Florianópolis, like I was sharing before. They are going to be state of Paraná. Curitiba is the capital of the state of Paraná. I'm going to write over here, Curitiba. Super solid, super safe city, Curitiba, all right? And very interesting, like this reputation for safety in Curitiba, in addition to a very good position from a logistics perspective, is making Curitiba a major choice for companies from the United States and other countries when starting a subsidiary in Brazil. So many companies are going to say, listen, we don't want to go to São Paulo. São Paulo has like chaotic, traffic. Safety is unfortunately not really high. And, there are so many downsides to São Paulo, other than the fact that it's like the main business city in the country, right? That they end up saying, you know what, we're going to settle for Curitiba because, Curitiba, naturally not nearly as business focused as São Paulo. But guess what? You have so many other upsides, such as, a much better traffic, a much safer city, a good culture, a nice stream of prospective employees. So many companies, they are gonna settle for Curitiba. All right, so Curitiba is another good choice. Now, if we're talking about the Northeast, Stephen, unfortunately, right, safety is typically of concern. All right, and I myself, I am very used to Fortaleza. Right, I spend a lot of my time in Fortaleza, in Ceará State, more than probably any other state in the north or northeast of Brazil. I never had like a serious situation with myself, to be, I don't know, robbed at the gunpoint. Never had like something, snatched from my hands. Never saw a crime occurring in front of me. But I'm also very careful, right? Like I'm always paying attention and following the playbook of how to safely behave and be happy in Brazil, if you will, right? So, throughout my experiences in the Northeast, never had any serious incident, to be honest with you, right? So I guess there is also a really big component of, randomness in those things, right? Like it really depends on you, your behavior, and just the chances that we are taking pretty much every day that we are alive, right? Not only in Brazil, but even in the United States, right? Like, I mean, there is a lot of, opportunity for problems, right? And I guess in Europe as well, or anywhere you are, there is always a chance that things are not going to go the way you expect. So there is that. I hope it does, offer you another perspective on this dilemma, if you will, Stephen. Hermon, yes, in Blumenau every year. Good, Hermon. Thank you for sharing. Steven Nichols, Belo Horizonte, right? Yeah, Belo Horizonte, not as safe as Curitiba and Florianopolis, like from a very statistical perspective. But I would guess, right? Like, I mean, those things, they change over time. I haven't been researching, lately about this topic, but I would think Belo Horizonte, I would expect Belo Horizonte to be better than São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro in terms of safety, and maybe not as good as Curitiba, and certainly not as good as Florianopolis, right? Like Florianopolis, again, is a different ball game, right? Mostly because of, the geography. Again, like people doing crazy stuff, they don't go to Florianopolis because if they do it, it's very easy, like for the police forces to kind of catch you at the connection between the island and the continent, right? So Florianopolis is just a different ball game, right? But Belo Horizonte, I think it's worth a shot, Stephen, in terms of investigating more. Belo Horizonte, really, I really love people from the state of Minas Gerais. They have, something very unique. They have a certain level of coziness. Culinary, food in Minas Gerais is amazing. People in Minas Gerais, they are hard workers. And Belo Horizonte is a huge city, right? Like, I mean, you have a lot of infrastructure, companies, beautiful buildings, beautiful neighborhoods. So also a very good candidate. Matt Gaines, do you feel that Porto Alegre is a safe city? Yes, Matt, for sure, right? Like, I mean, if we're comparing, just like I did for Steven, if you're comparing to São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, that's for sure, okay? Porto Alegre is a pretty big city, right? So with big cities, you always have some level of challenges, right? Like for the government to, take care of those, basic needs of the population, like infrastructure, traffic, like basic services and so on. But whenever I've been to Porto Alegre, like I would have this kind of, feeling that I would have elsewhere in the south of Brazil, right? Whenever you are in these, like, southern states, you do feel like a different type of vibe than the rest of the country, okay? And very interesting, like, the southern states in Brazil, in average, in my opinion, they are safer. They are safer than in the northeast and the north of the country. All right, okay, so we are past our end time over here. I want to say thank you to all of you. So I don't forget about our partner, Remax, Nomad States, located in Rio de Janeiro. If you need help, finding properties in Brazil, that's the way to go, right? And letting you know that our next live stream is gonna be on Wednesday. Remember that on Wednesday we're gonna meet at 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. Is not the same time that we meet on Sundays. Also remember that Sundays we typically do twice a month. So today, February the 1st, is our first Sunday of the month. And later during the month of February, we're gonna have a second live stream on a Sunday. But next one is gonna be on Wednesday. So if you have any topics of your interest to be discussed live, make sure to join us on Wednesday. And again, thank you for your participation. Don't forget to like this live stream, follow us for more content, and wishing you